ahead.
Yeah.
Why is it doing? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny pre-cabinet meeting. We'll go to the item 1 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Anybody? Nope. Apologies from absence.
Yep, we've got apologies from Councillor Nurdon and Councillor Riley.
Thank you. No substitutes.
No substitutes, Chair.
Chairman's announcements. I have nothing. I've just landed back from Thailand, so unfortunately haven't had time. Public speaking.
There is none, Chair.
Okay, we will next go to agenda item 11 on the cabinet reports. The first one is the strategic performance and finance report, and we have a plethora of people presenting. So, Sinead, Rodney, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll take you through a high-level overview of the performance element of the report, and then I'll hand over to Rodney to go through the finance element. As ever, the purpose of the report is to give an overview of the performance of the Council against the outcomes that we've set out in our delivery plan for 2022-24. And as part of the report, you'll see there are a number of appendices which detail our position at the end of Q2, which include budget variances in Appendix 1, delivery measure performance in Appendix 2, and then also a mid-year update of our delivery plan in Appendix 3. So I'll take the report as read, so just to highlight our overall position. So 18 of our delivery measures are reported as green this quarter. This means they're either meeting or exceeding where we expected them to be against our targets. 9 of the measures are amber at the end of Q2. That means they're currently not meeting our expectations, and we do have monitoring in place for those. The appendix on our delivery measures sets out the detailed commentary and context around the actions being taken for those measures. And at the end of Q2, we have no measures which are being reported as red. You'll see in the recommendations moving forward, we are proposing to increase the number of times the reports are being received by members, really to give you greater oversight and scrutiny of our performance. So we're looking to start bringing a Q3 report through to scrutiny and then through to Cabinet. And alongside this, just to know, the performance team, as ever, are reviewing and making continual improvements to these reports. And we're looking to introduce some further iterative improvements to those reports coming through to Q3. So you'll see some slight changes to the overarching Cabinet report, but we're hoping that this will give you some really good oversight of performance going forward. So I'll pause there, open to questions. We do have a number of service reps in the room for any questions on any service-specific performance.
Thank you very much. Open to the floor. Well,
yes.
Any questions? So, Susan?
There's quite a lot in this report, isn't there? One of the things I did notice, and I think it's in this report, but I was just trying to find it. I can't find the place where I made a note. There seem to be several things where things are slipping back in time. So where they've been predicted to be done but by September 22 or something, they've been moved to 23. You can correct me if I'm looking at the wrong report, but is there a reason for those slippages?
So that will be in the delivery plan where we've made an update against those projects. I won't be able to say specifically why the reasons are unless we can identify which lines you're referring to in terms of the projects, and someone in the room might be able to answer that for you.
But there is, Sinead, I think it's fair to say on the delivery plan, there is that last column which has rationale for change. So what we've tried to do is where you'll see those dates slipped, then for each of those, whatever that is, and I'm just looking at one, and Corinne will really thank me for picking hers, but oh no, it's not one of mine. Oh, I'll pick one of my own. Oh. But if you take mine, for example, on page 108, which is the review and the process for FOI and subject access requests, I've pushed that date back because we're hoping that would be part then of the CRM solution. So if I was to go out and procure an FOI system, as an example, that would be a cost that you would question me, actually, why are you doing that now when that could be, I'm not saying it will, but it could be part of the CRM solution for those rationales. Then we've tried to explain why that is. So hopefully that gives you some context.
Yes, thank you. It just there seemed to be several where there was a sort of slippage, and I just thought, is there something overarching that's causing this? But if you're saying they are all to do with potentially those sorts of things, new bits of software, then I could see why that might occur across several things.
Yeah, I think scanning through it, as senior management team, there's nothing that we've gone, oh, there's an overarching issue here that we need to be concerned about. There are specific reasons for each of them. So we've not seen anything that's kind of red flagged us as we've gone through it.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett, you raised your hand. Ken? Sorry, you raised your hand? No. Oh, no, okay. Councillor Davies.
Thank you very much. It's page 31, if I've got the right papers here. And it's about possible reduction to income caused by nutrient neutrality. And given that it's quite a key issue, it says that the actual reduction has not yet been fully established and is being investigated. I mean, we do know that there's going to be quite some time before that is resolved. So is there any indication in terms of how severely that impacts?
I think we've got Helen here who can probably help with that one.
Oh, I thought Rodney was going to do that for me then.
Sorry about asking the question, but
No worries. So obviously we're still getting applications submitted. So the number of applications haven't fallen that greatly. We have still got some on hand subject to obviously having the mitigation measures and the credits that can release those permissions going forward. The reason we've put in that and how that will impact on planning income fee will depend on when that mitigation comes forward and how much we apportion out of this year's budget, which we do every year. So those undetermined applications, part of that fee is carried forward into next year's budget. So we don't lose that fee. It's just where it's actually going to be landing, whether it's in this financial year or next financial year. There is a paper coming to Cabinet shortly about looking at how we can bring forward our own measures. So I won't steal the limelight there, but there is a report coming forward on how hopefully we can speed that up. But we are still working on that with our other colleagues in other Norfolk authorities to look at the catchment area as a whole. So we're not losing planning fee, it's just where that will land in each financial year's budget, because some will have to carry over. But we're certainly still getting major applications being submitted because there will be a solution.
Thank you. Councillor Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the page 41 of the Cabinet Papers, amber measures, and the first one says the progress towards delivery of predicted 8.6 million savings through the South Norfolk and Broadland collaboration measure at reference 1. And I apologise if I haven't understood this, but could you just tell us what is being measured, and so in what way has it fallen behind? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. This measure is obviously the cumulative savings of the 5-year period from the start of the joint working with South Norfolk Council. So very much this is always a bit of an estimate of what savings are going to be delivered. Well, to date we know, but going forward it's a bit more variable about exactly when savings are actually going to come into place. At the moment, the estimate is about 8.4 million, so it's slightly lower than actually the target, but that doesn't mean that we aren't looking to deliver additional savings coming through. And of course, what we're measuring in this doesn't include some of the other savings that have been delivered, like the waste contract. We've delivered significant savings from the re-tender of that waste contract, which isn't measured against that 8.6 at the moment. So very much we're close to that target and we're doing everything we can to bring it back up to that target. But you will be aware there were some delays in projects due to COVID, and therefore we are playing catch up with some of our projects to deliver the efficiencies that we want to out of this joint working.
Can I come back on that? Thanks. So have we got a list of the things that are being included or not included in those savings? One of the things that concerns me is, had we not collaborated with South Norfolk, we of course would have had to go out to tender again for the contract when it came to an end for refuse collection. So I'm not sure why that should be in there, or if it's in there, but the thing that really concerns me is that we don't know what is being included and what isn't. Thank you.
So the joint collaboration working group did look at this, and there was a paper submitted to that group which detailed the savings. So I'd like to refer you to look at those papers.
Yeah, it was just that the community community service is predicting an adverse variance against budget of 311,000. So given that this is something to do with the waste contract also, and did you not just say that that had helped the savings, or I'm a bit confused there.
This is where it can get a bit complicated in that actually when we retendered there was a saving, therefore that reduced the overall baseline we started from. Since then there's obviously been inflation, so actually the cost is now going up to reflect that inflation. If it wasn't for the fact that we reduced the baseline, it would have been even higher with that inflation on top of the higher initial baseline. So there was a saving from doing that retender, but that doesn't mean we're not immune from inflationary pressures going forward.
Yes, and as I understand it, there's also the true up issue, which I'm assuming is still under negotiation with Veolia.
It is, but very much the true up is that inflationary increase from when we let the contract to when the contract started. I don't think it go as far as a dispute. We haven't got into a dispute mechanism at the moment. We're under a discussion with the contractor. Yes.
Yes, for clarification, Chairman, on page 31, 3.11, under planning, obviously we've heard that there's a number of vacancies, which is making things a little difficult. But how is it being progressed on the last point there? Possible reduction caused by nutrient neutrality. Have we moved on that, Chairman?
I think I just clarified that with Councillor Davis in that we are still receiving planning applications, but some are being held up because of nutrients neutrality. So where that fee lands in which financial year will depend on whether or not we meet our income predictions. But we are still getting major applications submitted. They are just being held up because of nutrients neutrality. But we continue to monitor that as we go through to Q3 and Q4, where we will be getting a better prediction on whether or not we meet the estimated fee income for this financial year.
So it hasn't been really agreed exactly where we go on assessment for the nutrient neutrality. No. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, it's just another point to clarify. I think I understand it, but just clarification because we did talk about it before. But on the finance capital dashboard overview on page 38, there's quite a significant sum under Broadland growth developments. And as I understand it, that's the 3 million which was allocated, but that is unlikely to be utilised this financial year. So that will simply be carried forward. I mean, it's quite a significant sum. So does that go back? I don't know. What happens to it?
As members will be aware, there's the aspiration to invest through Broadland growth in potentially additional properties that might build out. But until there's a scheme that's been developed and come back through Cabinet for approval, that money won't be spent. So the council is absolutely right that that money would be slipped into next year or until we get a scheme that actually members wish to approve and move forward with. But again, that's probably being held up a bit by nutrient neutrality as well, because obviously it's difficult to come up with a new scheme with that still in the background as well.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's really good to see that many of the measures are meeting targets, such as collection of council rates and business rates, and also the days taken to process new claims for housing benefit and council tax. You know, that will be very important to our residents who are on lower incomes, I'm sure. But under the amber measure was staff retention, and I just wondered if you could perhaps reassure us that we are going to have the staff in place to continue to provide the services at the good level that they're being provided at the moment. Thank you.
So staff retention, I mean, I can talk about it generally. Mike can pick up any particular issues in the housing and benefits. So I think there's a lot of things going on nationally at the moment that we're seeing play out here, and I'm sure everyone is seeing across the board. I think we're seeing it's difficult. Recruitment is difficult at the moment, but what we have done with recruitment, which is obviously getting the people in, is we're doing more targeted advertising, and we've seen some really good outcomes from that and getting some staff in. Once they're in, we need to retain them, absolutely. What we've started to do is, so we have, as I said in the report here, there's been a new onboarding process for staff, which we've had some fantastic feedback from. That's working really well at a corporate level. There are a few service areas where we need to work a bit harder with those managers to make sure that that onboarding process continues in the way that we want it to, so that when those people are with us, they want to stay with us. What we're now doing through my new HR and OD lead, Victoria, who you'll probably see at one of the meetings, is drilling down a lot more into those exit interviews by service areas to understand, are there pockets whereby we have particular issues that we need to look at? Is there something more we need to do from a staff retention perspective? So what you'll start to see with this measure is probably more qualitative information coming through so that we can start to really highlight where that is. And then we also want to have a particular focus on any of those that leave within a year, because some of them, there will be reasons. So I was talking to Victoria about this morning. Depot and leisure, you will always see that very high churn. Staff come in as a way into the organisation. It's a good fit in. It means you can then see internal adverts. So we're starting to look at that and where those staff then move to, because whilst they're a leaver, it's good that they move on to something else. But then we're also looking at those that leave early within that first year. Why is that? So that we can get underneath it. But ideally, where we want to get to is that doesn't happen, because everything is exactly where we need it to. Some of the stuff as well, local government isn't for everybody. Some people come in and really struggle with the politics and the kind of, it's just a different world to private sector. Some people thrive and love it. I love it, weirdly, but other people don't. So it's all something that we're kind of looking into, and we are drilling into. What I hope to also bring to the Q3 report is that benchmarking data for you. So one, you can see where do we compare to the Norfolk Council, so we can see where we are with our partners, but also we have what's called a local government family where we're similar sized authorities and we're compared to. So again, I want to give you that data, so you've not only got it standalone, you've got that comparison across the board. But I think what we are seeing is what is playing out at a national level. Our hope is, as we go through the next couple of years, which is going to be tough globally and nationally from a kind of a cost of living perspective, we're seen as a secure employer again. So we've kind of gone through that circle. So we're hoping to see some positives come from that as well.
Just a matter of interest, the staff that you recruit, do they come from other councils or they come from outside government?
We get them from everywhere. So we have had people, quite a few, join us recently from Norfolk County and Norwich City. I know Mike's got some teams, some staff that have come from those areas. We've had quite a few come from Lidl recently, and they bring a really interesting view, but very different view, and that brings some qualities. We see it across the board, and obviously we get people straight out of uni through the grad programme and through apprenticeships as well. So I don't think we're seeing a particular market segment that are coming to work for us. We are seeing across the board, which I think is quite healthy.
So we haven't got to the stage yet where we need to recruit overseas like the NHS?
No, we're not there yet. I think we'll leave that to the NHS to deal with that one.
Okay, Councillor Holland.
Yeah, the recommendation to increase the fees for search of whole register and so on under 3.28 on page 37. I don't know, I may have missed it, but could somebody tell me what sort of percentage increase that is that we're looking at? And also, when have these fees been in place for very long? I mean, were they some of the new fees that we put in? That may be just my misunderstanding, but.
Yes, this does represent quite a significant increase. It's about a 50% increase on the current fee for the main land charge search. obviously there's some work done to make sure it reflects the cost of providing that service, and also to make sure that the people who are actually applying for the land charges pay for them as opposed to general taxpayers. But this is very much a consequence of the fact we go into a single sort of system, a single IDOC system, and we're therefore required to have a single fee for land charges across Broadland and South Norfolk following a previous decision of members. And therefore we need to harmonise, and these are considered to be the appropriate fees to harmonise on.
So were South Norfolk's fees much higher than ours then? Is that what you're saying? Is that what we're doing? So we're now increasing Broadland's fees to match South Norfolk's fees. Is that right?
I think just to add to that as well, whilst that looks like it on the face of it, you do have to do cost recovery for your fees and charges. So there is a cost recovery element, and part of that is the staff. So when you join the staff and you've got common terms and conditions, you've got people on the same salary, so you have to make sure that you can recover that cost. So there is that element of it as well with those fees and charges. But any more than that, and I'm going outside my knowledge of the land charges, fees and charges.
So presumably the extra costs that we're having to impose on people because of the collaboration, how does that affect savings, which we're supposedly made? Is that sort of is that being used to offset some of the savings that we're making for collaboration?
I don't think there's not an extra cost, because the staff is the staff and you've always had that cost. What I'm not sure there's been is the right element of cost recovery on land charges to date. This is simply making sure that we have the right cost recovery element for those land charges fees, I think. Because I did the terms and conditions, so I know that those costs have been, but Debbie's going to come and rescue me. So I can stop digging.
I don't think it's rescue so much. I think what it is the land charges fees hadn't been looked at for some time. They weren't for cost recovery. So in other words, the charge to the people for the service wasn't the cost that it cost us to do. So that was being covered by our general income, the normal taxpayers. So our commercial strategy says we will cover full cost unless there's a reason not to do so. And that's why these have been reworked, and they will be the same because obviously we're using the same people, the same system, and we've worked out the average time it takes to do each of those activities. And that produces, a cost out of that comes, the amount of resources that are put in, plus the cost of the system, overheads, etc. And that produces that cost there. So that is the cost of carrying out that service. It's not making a profit or anything like that. That's the actual cost. And what we're suggesting is that should be charged, or proposed is that's the charge that should go to the people who are receiving that service, rather than that cost being covered by the general taxpayer. And as I know it's gone up in percentage terms, but it is a very small part of buying a property, and obviously you only incur those if you're buying a property. So as a cost of purchasing a house or something like that, it's relatively small in the whole scheme of things.
So you saying when we did the land searches before, we were losing money on it, or has the cost actually gone up to reflect these?
So costs will have risen in years because obviously there's pay increases and we bought a new system and things like that. So costs will have changed over the years anyway, just through inflation. But yes, we weren't covering that. We weren't recovering the total cost. So in other words, the taxpayer was picking up the additional bit that we weren't recharging.
Thank you very much. Any other? Mr. Councillor Davies.
Thanks. Sorry, working way through this rather long report. So on business as usual, reference P5 on page 136. And my question arises because I was asked a question by the chair of a parish council just the other day on the issue of infrastructure and essential services. So under P5, we've got work as part of the Greater Norwich Growth Board plan and help deliver high quality infrastructure that helps facilitate and support housing and employment growth. And the question was around what's included within infrastructure. And how is it that this infrastructure cannot be supported then? And it goes back to the earlier question around recruiting staff. And so the question was around, well, if this is under, this is part of planning. So now I appreciate that planning has certain, sections, if you like. But the question was around about integrated planning and why that can't be more effective, given that you might have a school provision, you might have a doctor's provision, surgery provision within a development, but we know we haven't got the staff to support them. So that was the question I was asked. The county councillor, Andrew Proctor, was also there, was also asked the question. And of course, it highlighted the way in which we are work within certain, I almost say silos, as opposed to integrated planning. So when we say plan and help deliver high quality infrastructure that helps facilitate and support housing and employment growth, I just feel that there's something missing there in terms of being able to link it up with the ability to be able to actually support that infrastructure once it's built. I'm not sure where that comes within this plan, but it's clearly within this document. But I feel I should raise it, given that I was asked the question, and that it doesn't seem to be addressed within our overall delivery plan. We might be able to deliver the buildings, but how is it linked with the actual services that we know are under pressure?
Thank you, Chair. I think clearly as part of any growth, we have to ensure, and we consult as part of our Greater Norwich local plan, to make sure the right infrastructure and the right services are coming forward. So all the statutory bodies are involved in that. Each development doesn't have to address the wider, if you like, demands of infrastructure, but it has to make sure its infrastructure is acceptable in its own terms. So we're never going to be in a position where everything can be resolved through the development coming forward. But as part of the Greater Norwich Growth Board, we do have the Greater Norwich infrastructure investment plan that will be coming to cabinet in February to sign off. So each year we agree where that pool sill, for example, is coming from and how we're going to look at that infrastructure coming forward and what is prioritised. So I think probably that's a question for that meeting when it comes. But I think, the fact that you relate to resources, we haven't got enough resources to get the infrastructure coming forward, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because each development does actually look at its own scheme and actually the infrastructure to deliver that. But in the wider sense, we do actually obviously look at a Greater Norwich, what infrastructure needs to come forward, what is the annual growth plan, how we should be pooling that sill, that community infrastructure level, to provide those bigger bits of infrastructure that need to come forward. So I think that's probably a question for when you sign off your investment plan later, well, in the new year. But clearly, actually, we are working together. We do involve all the statutory bodies in looking at actually what needs to come forward. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that statement coming forward.
Thank you. If there are no, nearly got.
This was the recommendation to bring forward the capital budget for remote working. So I wonder if somebody I couldn't see reasonings why you need to bring it forward, but I'm sure there is one, and I may have missed it. So if somebody could enlighten me on that, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. So we always had provision in the capital budget for a remote working access solution. So that's a solution that our staff that remote work are able to still access their systems through an interface. The system is old and out of date. So we always had plans to refresh that. We've been able to work for our ICT and digital plan and can see that we can bring that forward, but also the timing in terms of moving into the Horizon building makes it a good time to look at our remote access solution as well as the way in which we work. So the rationale for bringing that forward is to enable us to spend still to budget, but at an earlier delivery timescale than what we had originally anticipated.
Yeah, I assumed it was because if you do it quicker, sooner rather than later, you may get it slightly cheaper. Is that also part of the problem, the issue? Yeah.
It could be, yes, but also the delivery of our remote working access solution will enable productivity efficiencies as well. So that helps from both a staffing and resourcing perspective.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll take us to page 45 of the Cabinet Reports. Item 8, the recommendations. There are 3 to note, 1 to approve, 2 to recommend to Council. Can I take those en bloc? Everyone happy to do that? All those in favour? It's unanimous.
Yes, unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll next move to agenda item 12. It's page 153 of the Cabinet Reports, Treasury Management, and we'll Darren, and we'll have Rodney as well.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points to note from the report. This report gives an overview of the Council's Treasury position at the Q2 point at end of September 22. Interest that the Council has received on its investments has been increasing throughout the year to date as rates have risen, and investments that have previously been invested at a lower rate have now matured and we've reinvested at higher rates, and so that's been positive in terms of the income we've been able to generate. We've seen rates that we've invested at as high as 5% for some investments, although rates are still volatile at the moment, and we seem to see investments rates settling at between 3.5 and 4%. Our Treasury advisors expect these to peak at 5% by next September 23, and then start to decline. The income that we've received is a combination of payments from the Diversified Income Fund that is managed externally for us, and maturing fixed term investments and cash that we've received from our Barclays Bank Fund and some money market funds. There's been no borrowing required by the Council to date in 22-23. The report also includes our performance against our prudential indicators set in the Treasury strategy, and there have been no breaches of those indicators. The remainder of the report is an economic update from our Treasury advisors link that they've provided for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the report? Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. We've previously brought up about investing in countries with poor human rights. I know that various countries, including Qatar, have now been removed. Do you have a total of how much money we have made from countries that have since been removed from our approved countries list?
Not to hand, but I could find that information.
Be interested to know.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
So, are we investing in gilts then? Seems like a good opportunity to do so.
We haven't currently, but we're just looking at our sort of range of banks at the moment. But
if I can, I think we also need to be aware of what experience and ability we've got to invest in some of these markets as well, because obviously there are risks involved in anything like gilts. So I wouldn't want to suddenly change our investment strategy into something like gilts without making sure we take that proper advice first, because I don't want to be sitting here in 6 months' time saying, oh, we've decided to put some money in gilts, and by the way, we've just lost sort of £500,000 because of our investments. So very much for our treasury management strategy, it is all about security of our investment is our primary consideration, to make sure that if we invest 5 million at the end of the term, we still have 5 million.
Thank you. Councillor Green-Goulet.
Are all our investments in the UK, or are there still some outside the UK?
They are currently all at the UK. We've got one investment with Landesbank in Germany, but the rest are all UK. Yeah.
Councillor Holland. Sorry, Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just wondering whether, Rodney, obviously this results in some extra income that we weren't expecting, but do you have a feel for how much the inflationary pressures are going to affect our expenditure as a council, all things being equal?
There's nothing to do with Treasury management.
I think this was very much linking back to the previous report where you saw our cost of service got a pressure of £400,000, and there's extra income from the investments worth £700,000 this year. So overall, we're seeing a positive effect. Obviously, this is two edges of the current economic climate. Inflationary pressures causes additional costs, but investment income and interest rates going up creates extra income because of that fact. We've got prudent balances and we're able to have some money invested to support our council taxpayers. So it is two sides of the same coin in many ways.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, we'll go to recommendations on page 158. So 2 recommendations: Cabinet to endorse the Treasury activity and to note the prudential indicators. Okay. Everyone in favour? Unanimous.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to agenda item 13, best-in-class housing, with Mike, please. So it's page 161, Ken. Morning, Mike.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, all. We'll just have a countdown for about 30 seconds until Richard comes flying through that door, because I've told him he's late already. We'll see. Just to start us off then with best-in-class housing report. So as you know, we brought a report in 2 years ago around our best-in-class model, taking that forward. Since then, we've had a huge amount of success and support with our temporary accommodation and our best-in-class model, looking to ensure that those who are most vulnerable are supported. We've been in a position now, as well as relationships with some of our key providers. There you go. There's a bit more than 30 seconds, but that's fine. Sorry. As well as some of our key providers, but key partners who rate Broadland Council as a very high-performing council in terms of this regard. And for example, if Shelter hear that it's one of our cases, then they breathe a sigh of relief because they know that we'll come in and we'll do something about it. So we've been an excellent council up to date. What we've got is now we've got ourselves into a muddle, not because of the work of Broadland Council, but because of the environment that we're working in. So we've got this problem of we've had an issue with supply through COVID. We've also had an issue with demand in terms of the cost of living. So we're looking now at not just resting on our laurels, not just looking at what we need to do to react. We're looking at where we can be to mitigate the issues we've got with this increase in demand and lack of supply, to bring a new model into the council to look at offsetting those costs in the longer term. Looking at a cost model, which is important, but also looking at a human element as well. So looking at how we can support our most vulnerable residents. What we do know, and we have seen around the country, where poor quality accommodation is used to house residents who need to come into temporary accommodation. We know that poor quality accommodation does not improve the lives of those residents, but it also takes them longer then to move back into sustainable housing. So we're proposing a business case here of making sure that we can and we capture people who need that support, but do it in a financially viable way. Richard, do you want to just bring a bit more to life in terms of the actual proposal?
So I'm just going to revisit the demand and supply, just to add that COVID and cost of living are causing significant supply and demand. The other issues are we've got further demand coming through due to Ukraine. We've got further demand coming through with the asylum as well. This is looking at a long-term increase in demand. This isn't a short-term blip. It's just going to keep going up, unfortunately. Housing is all about throughput. I hope it's okay, but I always use the analogy of a traffic jam. The people at the end of a traffic jam are the people being housed. The people at the beginning are the people coming into my service. unfortunately, the number coming out of a traffic jam is smaller. So the wavelength of demand gets bigger and bigger for why they were stagnated in temporary accommodation. And unfortunately, we're going to have a period of time where that wavelength slowly moves through the system, which is going to be significant demand for some time. That's going to create a significant, sorry to say significant again, but financial pressure on the council if we do not take robust steps to look at investing capital rather than spending huge amounts of money on revenue. The bed and breakfast is also, it's a supply and demand in their world as well. Bed and breakfast used to cost £35 per night. You're looking at £50 to £55 now. All other councils are going to be facing the same demand. Therefore, it is a demand-led market out there. I can see those prices going up. The figures we put into the report is as they are now, but I can see in about 6 months to a year, they'll be £65 per night. So then the revenue will go up, revenue costs will go up even more. The proposal is to look at investing capital to offset the cost of that bed and breakfast. So as Mike just touched on, there is the financial strain towards this work, but there's also the humanitarian side. We can provide significant more support. We can get people ready while they're in our own temporary accommodation, and we can support them in moving on as quickly as possible. If they are in bed and breakfast somewhere, because unfortunately we try and place within district, but as they become more and more full, we're having to look wider, it becomes harder to support those people. So it's better to keep them in district, because then we can move them on into a sustainable house as quickly as possible. I'm talking simple things like getting proofs of identification. If they're in district, we can go and get it from them. Whereas if they're in Brandon, that's an officer pretty much gone for half a day to go there, to go and get it, to come back. And then that means that's another potential week in temporary accommodation at further cost to the council if we don't get that information as soon as possible. Within the report, you're looking at a wavelength hoping to go up, not hoping to go up, but hoping it goes up to a certain limit. We've used the is it OBE or OBS? OBS prediction for the economy as a benchmark to see where we should start recovery. These things do happen in housing as economy. Whenever there's a downturn, we normally see it recovering after 2 to 3 years. We're working on the best case model that's going to be the case here as well. However, there is always a chance that we might see a deep entrenched difficulty in the economy, which may mean that we might see further supply issues. We've put it at 43 because that's a sufficient amount to be able to offset the cost within B&B and the significant revenue costs we're going to have. We could, because we're going to see significant demand, say, let's go and buy 100. But the problem with that is that's our peak. And then hopefully 2 months later, we'll just have a load of empty properties around, and we don't want a load of empty properties around. So the reason we've come to 43 is it takes that long to pay back on the initial investment of doing up the property, stamp duty, legal fees. So then you've paid back the capital cost, and then you've just got a capital asset, which is of same value of what you've invested in the first place. Okay. Is that enough, or do you want me to go any more? Okay. I think I'm finished. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Do we have any questions for Councillor Hollander?
So the 43, presumably you're basing that on figures that we have now, bearing in mind that there's potentially going to be a downturn in prices to do with all the other issues that are going on in the economy at the moment. Would you anticipate spending less, or would you anticipate spending the same but buying more?
43 is the target. £200 per square feet is a challenging ambition to be able to achieve. That should be enough within the pot. The simple answer is not aiming to buy more. We may buy, if we go there and we need 8 and there's a 10-unit property, which is exactly what we're looking for, it may end up being that we get, but the strict value is we're looking at £200 per square foot as our target to achieve.
And obviously, I mean, as we see a downturn in the economy, I mean, what we're doing is one of the things we'll do is we'll bring in a specialist to help purchase a property, because at the moment it's Richard and I, and we've both bought private properties but not specialists in this area. So obviously, they're at the moment people are holding on to their property. If we see a downturn and there's a reduction in that, by bringing a specialist in, they'll be able to work that. They'll be able to do the deals that perhaps will save us the money. So 43 is the maximum, but obviously we'll do what we can, because this is the taxpayers' money we're talking about. So anything we can do to reduce that cost in a fair and reasonable way, we will do.
Thank you. So Councillor Catchpole, then Councillor Harpley.
Thank you, Chair. I was reading yesterday that the repossessions of homes, particularly of landlords' homes that they've taken out a mortgage to take on, is rising rapidly. Is that not something that we could look into? Because those properties that have been purchased to rent out surely would be ideal for the kind of accommodation we need.
So again, and that will be the model. Now, it's never the easiest thing to say, is it? Because you're making savings based on someone else's misery. But obviously, if we do find a significant downturn, now we know that landlords who have bought second homes are now struggling. Now, some of that is also affecting us, because they're obviously if they've got someone rented in, then they're looking to increase either their rent, or they can't support that individual with rent because they've got their mortgage to pay. So it's a double-edged sword. So yeah, we will continuously look over the market over the next 6 to 12 months to understand where that is, and we need to focus on a commercial basis. So we've got to be fair to those individuals we're buying properties off, but we've got to be fair to the taxpayer as well. So yeah, we'll have to work on that. But that's an avenue to explore, absolutely.
Councillor Harpley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thinking about people who are fleeing domestic violence. Are you making sure that your properties are well spaced out so they are in suitable locations for people who may need to be away from previous partners? And also, I know they're not safe houses, that's a whole different thing, but are the addresses or areas likely to be published, so making it easy to be tracked down by people?
So I'll answer the second one first. Regarding the addresses, we really try to not place not everybody, but within the profession, everybody kind of knows the main TA hotels in which people are used. So we avoid as much as we possibly can placing them there. Broadland already has 2 units in which we use specifically for domestic abuse. We also have places within South Norfolk. Domestic abuse really is going to be who will get the value of these capital investment, because they are dotted around and they'll be within the support networks in which we need. Whereas when we come to having to place in B&B, we're kind of at the will of the market rather than the will of what we can do with our own stock. What was the first question, sorry? Yes, 100%. Yes, they already currently are. It's that strict balance between making sure they're close to the support networks in which they need, but also making sure that they're far enough away to be safe. We also do target hardening. We work with county council on that. We make sure there's CCTV, suitable locks, etc., to make sure that the property is as safe as possible. And we do that specifically for the domestic abuse properties to make sure they're suitable.
And we have, as part of a national deal, then all councils work together on domestic abuse. So, it wouldn't be unusual if someone from London needs to move up to Norfolk to get that far away, then we accept people as vice versa as well. So where domestic abuse is concerned, it's the right place at the right time. It's not about the cost, and that's the important factor.
It's 25% of our total demand at the moment, domestic abuse, which is quite alarming.
Yeah, I'm well aware. I went to a presentation on a new scheme being rolled out across Norfolk. Yeah, left you a voicemail about it, actually. Yeah, a bit rambling, sorry. But yeah, when you were saying about keeping things within district, it's great for the majority of people, but there are some people, they need distance. So just getting that right balance.
100%, but this is why being 2 councils, 1 team really pays off.
Thank you. Any other questions on the paper? So I've got Councillor Davis, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for the report. Certainly endorse this longer-term planning. Certainly endorse the longer-term planning, and thanks very much for the report. I'm just wondering about the confidence in the figures, though, going forward. You know, you've got on page 166 the temporary accommodation demand forecast. Clearly, it's going to be an issue we're going to have to grapple with for some time. And I can see you've got the worst case and the best case. I'm just wondering, and we're not the only council, obviously, that's struggling with this. And there is clearly a role for central government. I'm just wondering to what extent there's kind of a move from, you know, councils together collectively to say this is something that needs dealing with at a national level. And if we're part of that.
Try that on. We're part of the Norfolk and national conversation about this. I mean, housing is a significant problem, and we know that. We know the central government know that as well. So, you know, there are ongoing conversations about how that model is supported and funded in the future. How we work in Norfolk is something that we're continually working to address as well. We do, and largely through Richard and his team, work collaboratively with our other districts. But is there appetite to be able to do that? That's something we will explore further. So I think, I mean, for me, the model will have to change over the next few years as we get tighter and tighter. And that's something we have got to work with. We've got to influence central government on this agenda as well, and not just about temporary accommodation, but that because as I say, well, the first part is to look at temporary accommodation. The second part is to look at that throughput and longer term, and that's about kickstarting housing. That's about getting the right homes in the right places. So, you know, some of that is national policies as well. So we've got to think broader than just what's in front of our nose. But yeah, certainly that's something we are thinking about that.
Thank you, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 173, 174, you refer to other options considered. You did make some reference to the importance of using the capital as against ever increasing rents. Any development on item 12 there? You did make reference, I think, to building in a way, but I wondered where you were on that.
So the building, I put in, I've just counted the caravans because that politically worries me. The building of what they call modular housing is definitely something we need to continue to consider. The problem is nutrient neutrality comes into it, but then there are places within both districts that aren't impacted by nutrient neutrality, but then we have to balance where they are compared to general support and needs and being near employment. So the main thing on here is if it can be delivered within the desired £200 per square foot, it's something that should definitely be considered by officers. And it's something we will definitely do so. We've just got to see how it goes with nutrient neutrality. The other thing is, even though the modular, you're still looking at a year and a bit to get everything rolling. Once you've gone through the planning, of course we can expedite that, but you are still looking at a year and a bit. And then we just don't want to be delivering these in 3 and a bit years when all of a sudden the demand's going down and we wish that we had them in a couple of years. So it's just that fine balance, but it's definitely not being discounted. If it's something we can do, we will definitely look at it.
Thank you. Councillor Wymark wanted to come in, and then Councillor Greenblue.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add a little bit to this because obviously this paper focuses on finance, but predominantly this is about people and about vulnerable people and supporting them at their most difficult time. You know, when you lose a house, you've got nowhere to live. So I just wanted to say this is what this is about. Excuse me. Obviously, Councillor Hartley spoke about people fleeing domestic abuse. And as a department here, we're actually working towards DAHA accreditation, which is Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. So that people actually understand how best to support people at this difficult time. But as I say, fundamentally, this is about people. But we are considering all options. Nutrient neutrality would be a problem about building properties now, which is why we're actually looking at the market about what is available. But we need to balance that, as I say, with the financial cost year in, year out. I mean, it's been costing us £250,000 every year or thereabouts, year in, year out. So over the last 4 years, we've spent £1 million. Now we could have bought the property that we're planning to buy now with that money. So this is a lot forward thinking. This is actually planning for the future. It's investing, because if we have capital investment and in the long term, if we don't need them, we can sell them. But we can also plan where we put these houses or where we buy these houses so they're in the right place to support people at the right time. So I just ask you to support this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the building modular option. The design of these modular houses have increased significantly over the past few years, especially I've seen them in Sweden and in Germany, like the Hofhaus principle of building houses. They got really quickly, and they can be sold on later on if you wanted to. So it might be an option to consider in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the problems with housing are wide and well known and growing. And so obviously I welcome investment in properties to alleviate that. But I'm wondering if any of this budget, or if there is another budget to help people to stay in their own homes, the homes that they're currently living in over the next few years, as an alternative or as a addition, because I think I understand that through the Help Hub, people can get help to do that. But could you elaborate, please?
So we have money within our current budget. So that's why we're not asking for more. We have we've got a couple of funds, key ones, Whatever It Takes fund, which is basically a few. We've got tens of thousands, not loads, but probably about £25,000-30,000 next year, still within budget. Where if the officers can do anything to help people stay within their property, they will do. That can be from, can we pay off half of their arrears so they can afford to pay off, they can afford to pay the other half. But it can also be that parents are really struggling to meet all the financial costs, especially through heating, of having more people within their house. And they need some extra, just even like £20 a week. That's a lot cheaper than £500 per week in bed and breakfast. So it's called Whatever It Takes because it pretty much is whatever the officer can do to allow that to stay within reasons, because we haven't got an endless budget, to make sure we can effectively avoid people going into temporary accommodation wherever we can. Okay.
And there are relevant grant schemes available as well, which we've already had that from Kerry's team, who did that last year. Who came forward. There's loads of different.
And ultimately, Chairman, that's right. It's just the ultimate aim is to do everything we can to try and keep that person in the property in the first place. That it's not only cheaper, it's better for them in the longer term. Unless, for example, a domestic abuse case, when it'd be better for them to move out of the property, then we will always do what we can, because temporary accommodation is always Broadland Council's last resort.
The frustration for the team at the moment is so many of the people presenting to us is stuff that we can't prevent. It's people selling houses. It's Ukrainians coming to us because they have it's so many things where we will do our best. It's just incredibly hard to keep people in, because the option is not there no matter how much money we throw at it. So you then have to make sure that you look at the next sustainable step for that person.
Thank you. If there are no more further questions, I'll take us to 175, and we've got two types of recommendation. The first part is for Cabinet to recommend to delegate authority, and then the second part is Cabinet to recommend to Council to various budget increases. If you're happy, I'll take them on block. Yep. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
Yes, unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If it's okay with everyone, should we take a 5-minute comfort break? And then, yep. Back on. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gents. We'll now go to agenda item 14. It's page 179 of the papers, and we have Kerry, Ella, and Mike joining us again.
So thank you, everybody. We are here just to present what is the beginning of this work, I think it's safe to say. So the cost of living crisis is very much at the forefront of everybody's mind, but it's certainly something that we're planning for into the next weeks, months, and probably years as we start to think about what our offer might be. This paper is an opportunity to share with members where we're at the moment in terms of our thinking, and from there it will develop and continue. Between writing the paper and today, there's been a budget announcement, so things have already moved on a little bit. So forgive the kind of absence of some of the facts that you may well now know. But just to give kind of a quick overview and a few facts and figures, the current key areas of highest inflation, as you will likely guess, are around transport, private transport specifically, not in terms of public transport, energy and food. You'll see that yourselves when you go out to the supermarket, the significant increase in food. All of these things have different impacts on different people, and we're starting to scope what that might look like. We are expecting to see 33% of all households in relative fuel poverty after next April, which really isn't that far away. And as you'll have just heard, a marked increase in demand for temporary housing as people's homes start to become that little less secure. We've started to look at who our most vulnerable groups are that we will be talking about when we consider this type of thing. People dependent on benefits will start to feel the pinch now. So those who are receiving full housing benefit, full council tax benefit, will be on a lower income on a day-to-day basis for their general costs. So therefore, the increase in energy costs and food will be hitting them hard immediately. Low-income households, elderly people and those with care needs, households with children, it comes as no surprise to tell you that the more children you have, the higher it costs. So that the greater number of children we see, the greater levels of vulnerability we may be present. Lone parents and households with at least one workless individual. When you start to put these different characteristics together, we can start to build a picture of those customers that we think may be most likely to suffer ill effects of the cost of living crisis sooner. So Ella's going to give a really quick overview as to kind of how we are managing this at the moment.
Okay, so obviously the vision for Broadland's Place is working together to create the best place and environment for everyone now and in the future. And as part of that, obviously there's the aim to grow the economy, creating an inclusive economy with job opportunities for everyone, supporting individuals and empowering communities, which obviously a lot of that is about communities and supporting vulnerable individuals specifically, which Kerry's sort of gone over who those might be in this crisis, and also protecting the environment, protecting and improving our natural and built environment and maximising quality of life. And that's really sort of part of that is ensuring we have the right homes for everyone, which I know Richard has also previously gone over to you. And so we see within this the cost of living programme covering all of those areas. And the main sort of vision that we've got for it is to enable residents, employees and businesses to weather the impacts of the crisis now and in the future. And to do that, we've got sort of 4 main work streams, one of which is our businesses. So that's sort of like business support, the Business Builder programme and regulatory support. There's our staff. Obviously, our staff are going to be hit by this crisis as well. And that's sort of looking at things like staff benefit schemes, how we maximise uptake of those sort of things. And there's also living well. So this is what we see covering all of the general necessities to sort of for our residents to live their lives. So it's like housing, energy, food, household items. And then participating in daily life. So that's sort of how our residents will go about their daily life. So connecting with their community, things like community safety, there might be an increase in community tensions. Transport, obviously we've gone over the increase in costs of private transport and a lot of our district is quite rural. And maximising income through things like benefits and debt advice. We have 3 groups that are sort of looking at all of our response. So internally, we have a strategic group, which is chaired by Jamie Sutterby, who's our Director of People and Communities, and an internal operational group, which is chaired by Kerry, who's our Help Hub and Community Senior Manager. And externally, we're working with our partners through the Health and Wellbeing Partnership. And Mark Hitchcock, the Chief Exec of Norfolk Citizens Advice, is chairing the hardship work stream as well. So we're trying to work with our partners through that.
learning this button management. So just to give you a couple of examples of the sorts of stuff that's already going on at the moment, and again, I know is pretty important to members in particular. We're doing some work at the moment around warm spaces. Again, something you'll have seen a lot about. We have a fund that's available, which will be, I think, spent by the end of this month, which will enable community groups to open up venues across Broadland to allow people who can't afford to heat their homes to come together and find that warmth in that public setting. Within those, we will also offer additional support to people when they're there, budgeting advice and anything else that they might need. So it's hopefully a helpful way for us to access those individuals and families who may need it. There is a map that's being created of those because they're not exclusive to Broadland by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a website that we can send around to members and further afield that will allow people to see those. We've had a huge amount of success with our energy rebate scheme, and that's pretty much closed now, again helping people with their energy costs. We've seen from the budget that there'll be additional support for people from April 23, particularly those on oil and LPG energy. Some other stuff which might be worth being aware of is the debt advice and budgeting support. Members will be aware that we've recently expanded our debt and welfare support team in order to meet the demands that we see on the service in coming years. And then finally, just to mention the Household Support Fund, because again, that's another update since the budget. We know that that will continue once this current tranche is over. So we will start to work with our colleagues at both national and county to see what we will be able to deliver for residents through Broadland. Just to note really, in terms of the comms for customers, we're really keen, having worked with comms, that we present a very simple message to customers. If you are in difficulty with anything in your life, you contact the Help Hub. Now, behind the scenes, we'll be speaking to relevant teams to get access for that person, but we're going to try and keep this message incredibly simple and clear for residents so that they know where to come for support. And then finally, one last bit from Ella.
Okay, so obviously we need to monitor the impact of this response for our residents and also on council services. So we are kind of trying to closely monitor caseload and demand and map the capacity across teams. And as the crisis continues, targeted support to the vulnerable individuals that we'll have identified is going to become increasingly important. And we are also scoping to do that our LIFT, low-income family tracker tool. So we're sort of looking at how we can use that to proactively find sort of households that might be especially vulnerable that potentially might not get in touch otherwise.
Thank you. So I have Caroline Cream-Goulou, then Natasha Harpley. Sue. Go ahead, Caroline.
Hi, thank you for the report. I noticed on your energy rebate scheme, this says all funds have now been allocated. Is there any additional help for families with disabled people who have to rely on electricity to keep them alive and to charge wheelchairs and to operate beds and everything like that?
Yeah, this is one of the schemes that were available to us for us to spend. There are absolutely other ways to support individuals like that on a case-by-case basis. So we will do as much as we can to maximise the opportunities for that individual person. So anyone you've got, forward them to the Help Hub and we will do what we can. At the moment, or until just very recently, that was one of the tools that we had at our disposal. There'll be others, and we've got other bits and pieces, like Richard mentioned earlier, the Whatever It Takes fund. We've got the flexible fund in the hub. So we will absolutely look to support people as best we can within our resources.
Another question, where can we find your cookbook?
A great question. So it's just being done. So someone in my team has kind of taken it upon themselves to do this in their spare time. They've done a cookbook for the year, and they've just come up with a Christmas meal for 6 for £13. So we are currently getting that marketed up, and it will be available early December for people to utilise. It's really, pardon? Yeah, it will be on the website. I'll send it around. But yeah, really good tool, hopefully, for families to use.
Natasha?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm going to endorse all of this, but I just have to say how sad it makes me feel that a country like this is having warm spaces. You know, I welcome everything you're doing. I really do. I appreciate it. But my God, we should not be having it in this country. And I feel absolutely full of dread, to be quite honest. When I went to the presentation yesterday, it said that Norfolk, the national average of children who experience domestic abuse within a household is 1 in 5. In Norfolk, it's 1 in 4. And I think all of this, combined with the cost of living crisis, I think people are going to be cutting back on things that make their life that little bit more enjoyable just so they can afford to pay the electricity and gas. And that's just only going to increase tensions. And I just see all of this pressure building up. But yeah, I endorse it and I welcome everything you're doing. You know, I applaud you for it, but it's awful. And my final comment is I heard on the radio this morning that there was a pilot scheme in some areas for people who need increased warmth for health reasons. The NHS are going to be paying for it because of like lung-related illnesses. This is now being put out to some other areas. Do you know if there's any scope for it happening in Broadland at all?
I don't, but we'll certainly be looking out for it as soon as we leave this room.
Great.
So, I mean, and I would really encourage, if anyone finds out about anything, I'd rather hear about it 10 times than not at all. So you might pick stuff up in different meetings that you're at. Please do let us know and we'll always look into them and see what we can utilise.
Thank you.
Just on that, because I haven't had a chance to tell Kerry yet, but that's fine. But we're actually really pleased that because part of the funding about District Direct, with the Chancellor announced another 300 million, and Tracy Beakley, who's now the Chief Executive of the Integrated Care Board, has said specifically she wants some of that money to go to districts to help. Now that's a real win. We've never had that before. So literally that was a off-the-cuff comment yesterday afternoon about 5 o'clock. So the fact that they're actually talking about that now, whether that's for this scheme or whether looking at District Direct or whether they're all combined, we'll have to look. But actually really quite positive. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you. Any other questions? And Councillor Davis, then Councillor Prudden.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you first, Sue? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Sue. Go ahead.
It's not a question, really. It's a comment to thank you very much for an excellent paper, to commend all the work you do. We're terribly proud of you, and we are told that, you know, our help desk is second to none. I'm not trying to teach my grandmothers and my grandfathers to suck eggs, but I do want to endorse that you'll have the little old ladies who are struggling, for whom even to pick up the phone and ring someone who they don't know saying I need help is going to be a struggle. And I know you'll treat them kindly, but I just feel I want to put it on record. Thank you.
And services we offer through places like the GP, through social prescribing, will really help to access those people. So we often try and think about where people do go for support. They might want to not ring the council because not many people do, but where are they calling and how might we be able to access them? And we'll continue to do that.
Some of our areas haven't even got social prescribing yet, but it'll come.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you very much. I very much appreciate the report. And as Councillor Harpley has said, it is tragic that we're in this situation in the first place, and to see that over 33% of households across Broadland district will be in fuel poverty should just never happen. But we are in the situation, and I very much appreciate the list that you've got of all the actions. But that's an issue, I suppose, in being able to advise constituents. So I've had people come along and say, well, we'd like to create a warm space here. And of course, it's, we have quite isolated villages. So and I think you said you're looking at maybe increasing the number of warm spaces. The problem is that the potential community centres that we've got aren't exactly warm spaces at the moment. So, and actually, I mean, I was approached by one community group who were looking at improving the heating during the summer, during the winter, so that would be good for those clients who come to them, and also be able to include other people. But I mean, the cost of the infrared heating, for example, that they were looking at was over £6,000. So I assume we wouldn't have that kind of funding, but it's being able to. So there is that in terms of how do we advise, and actually having that list that you've got there available for us in some sort of easily accessible format would be really useful. So that's just a suggestion. Thanks.
Absolutely. So one of the big things that we're doing at the moment is trying to pull resource together. What have we got? What haven't we got? How can we share that as easily as possible? We've been doing some really excellent workshops with staff. We've ran 5 of them, which is about sharing best practice. What is everybody doing across the teams? And we plan to take all of that learning and put it into a format that's really easy to share, which we can share with members alongside all of these different projects, looking at how we can make it really easy to understand how much is left in grants and things. But what I would say with regard to the warm spaces is that that's going to be for kind of operational costs, quite low level. But there are other funds that are available that can give more to the warm spaces than we can offer through our current budgets, through things like the Norfolk Community Foundation. And equally, there's umpteen other funds out there that might be able to look at increase use of heating systems and things. So with anyone that you're speaking to, please do forward through them to the community as part of the team. We'll give them as much help and advice as possible. It's certainly not the case that that's the only grant that's available to them. Often a conversation leads to a lot more than just that initial thing that they called about. So anyone you've got, please do send them to us.
Thank you. Councillor Catchpole.
Thank you, Chair. So one of the things that strikes me is that as people's reserves dwindle, that they have a sudden realization that they have no money for food. And in one of my other capacities, I do meet some of these people. So I suppose my question is access to food a recognised human right? And what are we practically doing, or can we do over the winter, that will actually help people get food when they don't have any money to buy any? Thank you.
So we have a whole work stream around access to food. And there's not only existing provision, such as food banks that we know we work with locally. We're not seeing those demand issues placed on food banks that you might have seen in the national press. We're fairly confident there's a good flow of food in and out thanks to local donations and things. But we're also looking at new opportunities such as social supermarkets. I don't know how aware you are of those, but they've been incredibly popular, where they effectively look like a shop, they act like a shop, but people can go in and they either make a small payment or no payment to the food that they're able to purchase. Most locally, probably the most easily accessible one is one on Hall Road. It's worth popping into, but we're looking at replicating that model across other places. There's things like community fridges, which again provide a real local venue for food to be stored and easily taken away. There are apps out there where you can access food that's just about to pass its sell-by date and that sort of stuff. So there's a whole host of things that we're putting together into a package. And failing all of those things, if people come to the hub, we will absolutely make sure that they are not left high and dry with no food, whether that be a food package or a shop if they can't access a food bank. Only last week we had staff going out and doing a quick shop for somebody for the essentials because they were in dire straits. So rest assured, we're doing a whole combination of immediate response to crisis through to longer term planning for how people can access food in a way that's nice for them, that doesn't have the same kind of stigma attached to it. People worry about that, and that's why social supermarkets have been so popular.
Can I just come back? So can you just tell me, so that people know where they can go if they have no money and they have no food?
Honestly, if I listed them now, we'd be here all day. But we're going to get, I can send out something that lists it all for you.
So I'm talking about provision by the council rather than by any of the other charities.
Just call the Help Hub. Call or email the Help Hub and we will do what we can with that individual. If you come across a person that's got no access to food, call the Help Hub number, email through to us, and we will make immediate contact with them to ensure that we can deal with that for them. Depends on where they live. If somebody lives near a food bank, we'll send them there. If they can't, then we'll take some food out to them. Does that answer your question?
And the Help Hub number?
Oh, gosh.
Sorry, aren't you going to send round a kind of a bit of
Yeah.
a fact sheet and
Yeah,
a
we
summary?
are.
So you'll get all of this in terms of these are the
all
different
here.
bits, these are all the numbers, contact details, so that will go round.
I wanted to say it's on the screen, but it's not. I never ring the Help Hub. I don't know the number. But certainly there's always someone there that will be able to do that. Or failing that, if you've got someone today, come up and see us after this meeting and we'll sort that out.
And the other thing is, by going through to the Help Hub as well, because there might be other aspects for the case, and therefore Kerry's team can direct them in exactly the right place. So it's best to go through everything directed through the help hub. Thank you. Anybody else before we go to Caroline?
I just want to say I've used the Help Hub and I found them really, really helpful. And my residents have as well. And I just find it's very sad that we have to rely on charity. And it seems to be going back to the Dickensian times. I find it very sad.
Thank you. So we have the recommendations on 193. So we've got item 1 is to endorse the programme. And item 2 was the comments on the potential areas. And again, I think that was the plead from Kerry there. If you know of any other things, if you just send them through to her, as she reiterated, she'd rather get them 10 times than not at all. So, all those in favour? That's
unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll now go to agenda item 15, antisocial behaviour. It's on page 194. And I think, Mike, you're doing this in favour of Nick?
Thank you, Chairman. So I work very closely with Nick around antisocial behaviour, mainly because of the vulnerable clients that I deal with, but it is his report, so he just apologised. He's on a Gold Command course, which sounds very grand, but that's about how you support things, the Norfolk system, when things go really wrong. So just to really bring, so what I'll be able to do is I can just introduce it. I'll ask any questions that I can. Otherwise, I'll take those questions and I'll have those answered for you ASAP. So just what this report about, this is a framework report and a new policy. So Broadland has a good track record in antisocial behaviour and dealing with antisocial behaviour, and Broadland Council, Broadland District has a very low rate of antisocial behaviour in the district. But we don't rest on our laurels. We need to just look at continuously what we're doing, and we are seeing increases in tension in the community. And that's manifests itself in issues such as domestic abuse. So what Nick and the council are trying to do with this policy is to look at bringing a common ASB framework, and in conjunction with South Norfolk, but it really doing two things: to look at a common policy so our partners know exactly where we stand in terms of a policy framework, to ensure that they know where we can and can't work together. So it sets out our stall, if you like, very clearly for our partners, but also for our residents, because antisocial behaviour is such a broad term. And one of the issues that we constantly get is people come to us about a problem. Now, antisocial behaviour is a perception as well as a reality thing. So we do know that, someone's tolerance level in one area in part of the district is different to another. So what this policy framework sets out for our communities is exactly what we consider to be antisocial behaviour and what we consider just to be nuisance or something that needs to be dealt with locally. So just to try and manage that expectations and really bring that. But I think this is quite an important element of policy framework to bring and get agreement at council, because then from that we'll be able to work more effectively with our communities. And that working is very much based around intervening early. Broadland Council has a good track record of trying to nip stuff in the bud. That is much more efficient than waiting for issues to manifest itself. So the antisocial behaviour and environmental protection team work very closely with my teams to really try and do that, because a lot of antisocial behaviour now is based in and around the home. And so we find if we can reduce that tension in the home, not only does it support that family or individual to thrive, but also then decreases the likelihood of that person having to move. So there's win-wins for us. But I'm happy to answer any questions or to take further questions that I can answer in due course. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? No. Okay, I'll take us to the recommendations, which is on page 199, is Cabinet to recommend to Council to agree the adoption of the proposed anti-behaviour appendix. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Not sure about that, Chair. Nick will ask me to do it again if there's no. Thank you, Chairman.
Just email it all to Nick and get your own.
Yeah.
Just make it up, Mike.
So I'll now take us to agenda item 16, which is page 217. And that's Nina and Deborah. Still morning. We're just. Thank you very much.
Right. So we're here to talk about the Rural England Prosperity Fund. We have been, the purpose of the report is to seek approval for Broadland's allocation of the funding, which is 569,552. Once approved, an addendum will be submitted to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. 30th of November is our deadline, along with the Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan that's already been submitted. And this report sets out what we propose for this funding to be used for in terms of local growth within rural areas. The fund is 24 months in duration, starting from April 23, finishing March 25. And we've asked Cabinet to agree to approve the principal areas of investment as set out in Section 4, to delegate to the Director of Place in consultation with the Section 151 officer and the MD and the Leader of the Council to sign off the submission on the 30th of November, and to delegate the Director of Place in consultation with the Section 151, the MD and the Leader to make any non-substantive changes in principal areas of investment as required by DEFRA, which is the department who are looking after this fund, along with the Department of Levelling Up. And the final one is to recommend a midpoint review of this grant programme in March 24. I will pause there for any questions, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Catchpole, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report we looked at in the Economic Success Panel. And since then, it's been concerning me that what we appear to be suggesting is that we should invest in a large piece of equipment for the Food Innovation Centre, up to about 200,000, rather than support many smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses with smaller projects across the district. And when I reread this through again, it struck me that might be partly because of the administration of the cost of the administration of the applications. But unfortunately, that really concerns me. I would genuinely like to see smaller pots go across the district than a large chunk of this fund going into one place. So perhaps I'd better ask for your opinion on why it would not be better to spread the funds across the wider district with smaller projects. Thanks.
So thank you for your comment, and I think it's a very fair point. The rationale behind including this piece of capital equipment within the Broadland Food Innovation Centre is, first and foremost, it will greatly enhance the innovation aspect of our centre. Capital funding coming from government is very rare indeed. It's a legacy of European funding, and we're not sure if we may ever get such an opportunity in going forward. And the reason why we think a piece of equipment within the centre would be really beneficial to many, many businesses is because pieces of equipment like canning equipment are often outside the reach of micro and small businesses. And that can be the difference between securing contracts with supermarkets and not. And we have the opportunity and we have the space to try and do something quite innovative and special. Hence the proposal within that's before you today. It is an option. You may choose not to go with that option, but it is an opportunity, and businesses have said that would be a tremendously helpful thing. So it would not be for the benefit of only one business, and we would do some work to make sure that whatever is selected is appropriate for many food businesses, but it would be helpful for that sector. That is one that we are really trying to push forward, where the food that we grow locally is processed locally, and a piece of equipment like this would certainly go a long way to help deliver that for those small and micro and small businesses that it's otherwise outside of their reach.
Thank you. Councillor Davies? Oh, so
Thank you. Just to echo Nina's comments, really, we know that the one of the biggest prizes for us in terms of economic development is capturing the value around our agri-tech and agri-food sectors. The economic growth strategy that was adopted earlier this year sets out our cluster approach to economic growth, and one of those clusters is food. This is a complementary proposal to go along with the excellent schemes we already have set up in Broadland in supporting smaller businesses with our Business Builder programme, further complemented by the capital grants that we're proposing in addition to this piece of equipment. This is a holistic proposal that encompasses and would benefit many, many businesses. I appreciate your concerns around purchasing one piece of equipment, but as Nina's already described, the barriers to entry in this area are significant in financial terms. And we feel that this piece of equipment could really help and benefit many of those businesses, fledgling businesses, to get into the bigger players of the game. Thank you.
Caroline, was that on this or was that a separate? Okay. Was you, Jan, was yours on this or was that a separate?
It is a large amount of money to spend on one piece of equipment. Can you give us examples of what types of food product would be canned with this equipment and what companies would use it?
It's a great question. So what's very big at the moment is low alcohol beverages. So we have a number of people within the alcoholic sector who are now diversifying into different types of products. One of these is low alcohol, and they are having to send and get in the queue with canning companies in the Midlands. There isn't any in the east of England that are available for lease, essentially. You basically have to get in the queue. And the other type of piece of equipment that is very expensive are filling machines. Not that I'm an expert, but if you do things like ready meals, which also have a lot of added value to them, filling machines, the cost of them is can often be prohibitive. But we would do, I would have to stress, a piece of separate work to ascertain what type of machinery would be the best one to go for, and which businesses are lined up in order to use it. So a piece of work does need to be done in order to satisfy ourselves which one will be the one to go for.
So this is basically for drinks, not for food.
No, that was just an example. I mean, it could be either. I mean, we would have to opt for one that would give us the most certainty for use within the BFIC.
If you need some advice, my husband works in the industry.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Davies?
Thank you very much. Where are we? What page? Page 218, para 1.3 does highlight the importance of farming to the area and the number of productivity of rural businesses in the area. I mean, farmers are under a great deal of pressure at the moment across Broadland. I mean, across the country, but across Broadland. And as I see it, this fund could be used to support farmers. Farmers are under pressure because of costs of fertilizer, because of recent weather impacts and so on, and the economic situation in terms of what they're producing and whether they're getting a sufficient return through the supermarkets and so on, who seem to have a stranglehold on the market. So there are a lot of opportunities for supporting farmers across Broadland. And if we don't do that, then the Food Innovation Centre and the canning or the drinks development and so on, the post-harvest production facilities won't be fed, if you like, with food and drink from the local farmers. So it's kind of putting things the wrong way around, it almost feels. And I'm not sure, and I detect that there hasn't been that much consultation on what kind of equipment would be most optimum, you know, for the Food Innovation Centre. So am I right in saying that originally there was proposed there was going to be two programs here, one for the Cambridge Tech Corridor and one for allocated across Broadland for small businesses. Is that right? Originally.
Originally, there was two, but there was one for communities, Pride and Place, and the Tech Corridor encompasses both the piece of equipment and the small and grants for businesses and county farms. Yeah.
Okay, so what we're saying here is that this fund could be utilised when we say the Cambridge Tech, Norwich Tech Corridor.
Yeah.
It could be utilised across Broadland. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I question kind of putting a significant amount of money into a capital piece of equipment that we're not quite sure what it might be for, and how it might relate to the production of food and drink within Broadland. It seems to be the wrong way around.
Okay, Councillor Holland.
Yeah, I think my concern is rather similar. We seem to be applying for something without actually being sure whether we've got the right numbers and things to go with it. Have we got any idea how many companies might benefit from this? I mean, there's a lot of, you keep talking about lots of research. What I'm worried about is I can see the deadline for submission is the 30th of November. So are we just rushing something through? Because otherwise we're going to miss that deadline. What I'm concerned about is there doesn't seem to be sufficient evidence to show that what you're proposing is actually a good use of the funding.
Would you like me to take that?
Please.
Yeah. So the deadline of the 30th of November, just to be clear, is almost a marker in the sand, and that is our opening approach for how we propose to carve up the funding, and then we go into a negotiation phase until if we get our contract with the relevant government department. So we don't have to specify by the 30th of November what type of piece of equipment. It's our intention. We've got 2 years to spend the money to do a detailed piece of work and to provide enough flexibility within the report that allows us or doesn't allow us to spend that money on this type of piece of equipment. It would be wrong to rush that piece of work. We wanted to do a detailed piece of work, but the noises that we are hearing from our cluster that has been set up and running a few months is that what is causing businesses to stall is that they can't secure the contracts because they're in a queue with other businesses and after the same pieces of equipment. I hope that's helpful, but we've got 2 years to spend the money, so we've got plenty of time to do a piece of work to figure out what piece of equipment and who might it benefit.
Okay, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support the pressure on farmers, as we all know. It's across the board. But I really am very supportive and support the Food Innovation Centre. I've been there myself, and I've been brought up to date by Clark Willis. But I really do think that the food we are producing and other products we're producing is quite a lot of it. Transport miles into the Midlands to be packed or processed. And I think the 3 larger units at the Food Innovation Centre have already been let. And I think there's now 10 other units for smaller businesses in a very wide area. And I do support that. As you say, or at least as I read here, there is still support to the farming industry. But I do think it's important that we press on with the Food Innovation Centre, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Baldwin.
Not a question, it's a comment. I think my position on the Food Innovation Hub is well known. It probably won't change. So I will be supporting this proposal.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we go to... Oh, sorry, I missed you, Caroline.
So you're saying that the canning machine as such was not 100% you're going to buy this. So that money could be used for something else for the Innovation Centre.
Actually,
anywhere?
we've tried to put in enough flexibility within the report that it could actually be moved into the grants section if that was appropriate.
Okay, so you're just asking us to approve this to get the money and then use it, decide another time what to.
I mean,
Yeah, I think they said earlier, didn't they?
Yeah.
What the money will actually be spent on. So now this is just trying to ensure that we capture this investment funding, because it might not be come around again. So and if we can secure £500,000, then great. Councillor Holland.
So the recommendations include delegating to the Director of Place, the Section 151 officer, the Managing Director and the Leader of the Council to sign off and submission of an addendum. So are we saying that if you chose to do something else, then those 4 people would be the people who would make that decision?
Thank you for the question. It's just a technical term that the central government are using for this piece of work. So we submitted our UK Shared Prosperity Fund investment plan earlier in the year. This is their addendum to support those rural local authorities. That's just the term that they're using. So the submission of the investment plan is required by them to be signed off by the individuals we've stated in the recommendations. It's just the process we're being asked to follow.
And I think, sorry.
If you do the piece of work and we don't do the canning machine and we do something else, that would still come back. Once you've worked out all those things and got your evidence, that would come back to overview and scrutiny or cabinet and go through the process again for members to be able to be clear about what it is we're putting that money towards.
Yeah, as the recommendation state, any non-substantive changes could be signed off by the individuals that are outlined in the recommendations, but any substantive changes would be brought back for approval.
And I think that's the key bit with this. So non-substantive is tweaks and in its minor bits and pieces to enable us to get the application. And I think the words are what we need to use for the application to go in. Any major changes will, of course, then need to come back through. This is just making sure we get the admin right around it. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Anything else? No. Can I take us to page 222, recommendations under recommend 6? 1 to 4, can I take them on block? All those in favour? Sorry, 222. And its recommendations as in section 6. So we've got 6, 1, 2, 3 and 4. All those in favour?
Can you put your hands up clearly so I can see you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4.
Against?
1, 2, 3, 4 against. Abstentions and 1 abstention. That's carried, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will now move to agenda item 17, EV charging points, starting on page 224 of the Cabinet Papers. Ken?
Chairman, can I just...
Of course you may.
I wish I didn't do earlier. And it was, it's in the report from that. So as Company Secretary of Norwich Community Solar, is that sufficient?
Yeah, that's sufficient. You're declaring that just for open and transparency. It doesn't matter how it doesn't change how you vote in. It's just for openness and transparency. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Annie?
Great, thank you. I'll try and keep this relatively brief because you've got me for 2 consecutive items. So the purpose of this report is to seek the relevant approvals to enable the installation of EVCP infrastructure within council car parks. And as you well know, public EVCP infrastructure is an important way to reduce on-road emissions and obviously support in achieving the government's net zero 2050 targets. So the recommendations within the report today are to agree to the principle that EVCPs should be installed at council-owned and managed car parks, to delegate decisions regarding an award of that contract to a third-party supplier to the Assistant Director for Economic Growth in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic growth, and then, as per Economic Success Policy member recommendation, to also explore as an additional project solar canopy carports and the role that they might also play in supporting with a phase 2 rollout of EVCP infrastructure. So very briefly to summarise, the project in front of you today enables the installation of EVCPs within council-owned car parks. under this proposal, the council would award a contract to a third-party supplier for an end-to-end delivery solution. So that means that the supplier are responsible for the funding and delivering of all of the necessary civil engineering work. They would then manage and maintain those EVCP units on our land, and then they would also own those EVCP units. So on this basis, those suppliers would pay the council an annual licence fee for any electric vehicle charging points that they operate. At the end of the licence fee, there's an opportunity for the council for those units to then be transferred into the council's ownership. And then lastly, as per the recommendation, there's also the opportunity, as I previously mentioned, to explore the additional project of solar canopy carports as a phase 2 rollout. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So, Councillor Borman, Councillor Green.
So to be clear, there are no financial costs or liability to us agreeing this scheme.
That's correct. So the council would receive.
A yes or
Yes,
no will suffice.
yes, that's correct.
Councillor Caroline.
Hi, Annie. How long is the licence fee term?
So obviously each of the suppliers who tender for the contract can put forward different options. Typically they're 10 years, then with an opportunity to add on an extra 5 years if you feel that the performance of that of the units is just the council's satisfaction.
Anybody else? I've got one question. Normally with the EV charging points, there's a different cost basis depending on cost recovery, and obviously that then goes down to the operator. And that. So have we defined what can be charged on these? You know, I mean, otherwise it's either you can go for no cost, then mid cost, and then making profit. So it was really just how that.
So again, we've asked all of those tendering for the contracts to set out their methodology for how they would price the purchase of that power. Typically, they will baseline it at kind of the UK average. Obviously, it's in the interest of those suppliers to make sure that the units are competitive, because otherwise they won't be used. So yeah, we will have to have a look at what the individual suppliers come back with in their in the tenders.
Any other questions? No. Okay, so we'll take that to the recommendations on page 227. Recommendations item 6, 1, 2, and 3. All those in favour?
It's unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. So we'll now move to agenda item 18. That's page 228.
So the purpose of this report is to outline the changes to the environmental strategy and then recommend the approval and adoption of the updated environmental strategy and then the associated delivery plan. And then in addition to this, the report also proposes to amend the current delegation on the environmental project reserve from the Assistant Director for Regulatory to the Assistant Director for Economic Growth, and that would be in consultation with the portfolio holder for environmental excellence. So the recommendations within this report are to approve and adopt the updated environmental strategy, which is Appendix 1, to approve and adopt the delivery plan, which is Appendix 2, and then to amend the delegation, as previously mentioned. And then again, very briefly to summarise, obviously the current environmental strategy and action plan were adopted in 2020. A revised strategy has now been drafted to demonstrate the Council's achievements and also to set more ambitious environmental targets, most notably the Net Zero 2030 target for the Council's Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. A delivery plan has been created as a companion document, so that will sit alongside it, and that outlines the activities that are going to take place over the next 2 years to support with the Council's net zero commitments and also to support with wider actions in terms of the climate change and environmental agenda. It's proposed that the strategy and the delivery plan will be living documents, so we'll keep them updated regularly to ensure that they address shifting local priorities and opportunities. And then lastly, as I've already said, as mentioned in the recommendations, it's suggested that the delegation changes on that environmental project reserve to support activities as outlined within the delivery plan. So I'll pause there for any questions. We've also got Kirsty here as well, who's obviously been instrumental in pulling together those two pieces of work. So happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions on the report? So, Councillor Catchpole, Councillor Davies, did I see your hand?
Thank you, Chair. It's good to have this environmental strategy updated regularly, so I'm pleased to see that. I'm concerned that I can't see in there anything about community projects, like low-value community projects that would be environmentally positive. Is there any funding available for those? It seems to be talking about the bigger projects, but if you could just point me in the right direction, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, so in the section under biodiversity and green space, so I realise it's not explicitly communities. We've got items in there around the tree planting projects that are currently taking place. So we've got a community grant scheme for tree planting, which has just launched. And so within there, we've got one of the outcomes is to engage with community groups and partner organisations in order to plant the tree target that the council has committed to. So that's a good example of one. We've also got other things within this section around running events at Broadland Country Park to sort of promote the biodiversity of that site, and also to engage people with some of the projects that are already taking place there. So they are embedded within this, but not specifically under a community engagement section. There are other things around clean and safe environment as well on page 20. Let me just find it. 20 and 21, which talk about litter picks and sort of raising awareness through clean air days and social media campaigns as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thinking more of small projects that communities can come up with for themselves that are within their local area that will benefit their community, such as in Aylsham. I know they're very interested in a rainwater harvesting scheme on the local recreation ground. So I'm wondering where and when that kind of small project fund could be made available.
So what I would say at the moment about this delivery plan is that it sets those targets, so the 2030 net zero target and the 2050 net zero target. There's a commitment within this to develop a more detailed plan around supporting with that district-wide decarbonisation. So that's the things that we do outside of our own direct council building and council operations. So those are the things that you're referencing. So this strategy commits to developing a more detailed proposal around that wider district decarbonisation. And I think how we enable our residents to address climate change and improve the environment is something that would sit within that piece of work, because that's really about that wider decarbonisation journey. So that's something that we're aiming to deliver in 2023, the strategy.
Thank you very much. We also have the portfolio holder. Judy, did you want to say anything on the paper? Or you...
No, I certainly congratulate the team on producing this, which is a much better document than before. But in response to Caroline's question, I mean, we haven't at the moment got grants for everything. We certainly not quite. We have and we have obviously we've started on trees, and we'll see how that goes. And I think that is getting good response. And I'd just like to stress we have up those trees, which in the grants, which on page, I think is 20, well, within there, it says it's £500. They're now £1,000 for community grant, for the community groups and for businesses. And I was just today also following up on the green loans, which have been quite slow off the mark, people applying for them. But that will be dealt with after Christmas, so we'll have much more publicity. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oops.
Sorry to come in
Natasha?
last minute. Thank you. I'm still a little bit confused about these really sort of hyper-local community schemes. Where can they get this from, if not within here? Because there are schemes running in Sprowston of community gardens. While they're not planting trees, they are having bug hotels, rewilding to encourage butterflies and bees, and also vegetable patches that people can get free food from. So it's obviously benefiting the community in terms of free food, but also biodiversity. And I have emailed about this before and just haven't been given an answer whether this fits within that remit, or if not, where can they get it from? And I'd like to be able to answer my community about this.
Thank you for the question. I think at this stage, we're looking at the biggest opportunities for the councils. We can move quickly to meet the ambitions of net zero in 2030. We'd welcome bespoke conversations with community groups and towns and parishes about what their needs and requirements are. We can't do everything. We'll move as quickly as we can. And as Annie's outlined, we're going to set a strategy about wider decarbonisation plans and supporting communities. But we'd welcome those bespoke conversations as we move forwards.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies?
Yes, thank you very much. I'd just like to echo some comments of my colleague, Councillor Laming, who I think has submitted comments already. But we also at the when considering this at the environmental panel meeting, I raised the issue of how this is going to impact or affect planning decisions, and suggestion that the council could develop a planning policy statement which would help new developments to reach minimum environmental standards. And this has happened elsewhere with other councils, so there are models that we can look at. So a planning policy statement could include things that requesting evidence on matters of such as low carbon design, energy efficiency, flood risk, pollution, biodiversity, and even potentially a toolkit demonstrating good practice for creating net zero carbon homes. I think it's something that we would wish to work towards, and that we would hope that this strategy would inform across the council these kind of approaches. But to see that actually happen, we need to take action in terms of planning in particular, and whether exploring a planning policy statement is something that we could consider together with clearly planning to actually activate this strategy. Otherwise, it's just a strategy without the following actions.
George?
Yep, thank you for the suggestion. It would be improper for me to comment on planning's proposals for their environmental strategy. So I'll pass the feedback on to colleagues and we'll develop that idea further.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Leggett?
You've got what we will be doing in 2022-24 on the third one, delivery of 9 new green infrastructure projects across the district. You did, I think, make reference to it. A little bit more clarification on that.
Yeah, so green infrastructure projects sit within the growth delivery team. So they're projects that we have Section 106 or SIL money to deliver. So if you want, we could look at making that the terminology in there a little bit more user friendly, as I realise it's probably council speak group. But yeah, so that's extending provision of access to green space throughout Broadland.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll go to recommendations, which are on page 231 and stroke 232. And can I take them en bloc? All those in favour?
Yeah, unanimous,
Unanimous. Thank you very much. So I'll next go to item 20, which is the exclusion of press and public. I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006 which will be disclosed to them. I so move.